Welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. Thanks for joining me. We are going to continue with our next installment of the Great Books Year One Reading Program, and we're covering another comic play by the ancient Greek dramatist Aristophanes. This play is called Lysistrata, and I am going to be referring to the Alan Sommerstein translation, which, by the way, is also available in this Penguin Classics edition, same translation as you get in the second edition Great Books of the Western World. Also, I'm going to be referring to some illustrations from this fine edition, Heritage Press edition of Lysistrata, and you'll see that there are illustrations here by Pablo Picasso, an artist you are probably familiar with. Yeah, it's a really cool edition, and I'll just share a few pictures to add some spice to the video. Now, Lysistrata, let me give you some background. It's set in Athens during the long, grueling Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens. It's a tale about love and war, about erotic love and violence with war. It's a tale about the battle between the sexes. It's a story also about collective action, maybe the first of its kind in literature. And in this video, I just want to briefly cover the cast of characters and their motivations. Then we'll do a brief survey of plot points in the drama. It's a simple plot. And then we'll dive deep into a few key passages, cover themes such as gender roles and power dynamics, the psychological impact of war, the conflict between love or eros and war with its associations to violence and death, thanatos. And we'll wrap up with a set of open-ended discussion questions that you can talk about in groups of your own, or you can reflect on this in your journal, or if you want to respond in the comments section, I would be thrilled to hear your thoughts. And you can even make a response video if you have a YouTube channel. So let's get on to the characters and plot of this play. Here's a breakdown of the major characters in Lysistrata. Lysistrata is our play's heroine. She is the driving force of the action. She is fed up with the Peloponnesian War. Now, the Peloponnesian War, remember, went on for 30 years, and it ended up in the decimation of Athens, like the unconditional surrender of Athens. And Athens was no longer the major power on the world stage that it had been in the Mediterranean region up to that point. And Lysistrata is very smart. She's very determined and charismatic. She's also very clever. She's a strategist. And she devises an ingenious plan to end the Peloponnesian War by means of organizing the women of Athens and Thebes and Sparta, the enemy, to rebel against the men by withholding sexual favors from them until they conclude a peace between the warring parties. Another character in the play is Calonice. She is a close friend and neighbor of Lysistrata. She initially resists going along with the sex strike plan. She's very earthy. She's average, normal, quite accessible to audiences. I think audiences connect with her quite easily. She provides some comic relief in the play. And eventually she is persuaded by Lysistrata to join the cause, even though she's reluctant to forego sex for this cause. Myrine is another Athenian woman who's known for her great beauty. She's featured in what is probably the funniest scene in the play, where we see her teasing her husband synesias, promising sex, but continuously creatively delaying it, forestalling it until he is just driven to distraction. Lampito is a Spartan woman who joins the strike. She's very strong and athletic, as you would expect from a Spartan. And she, in a way, represents the mutual desire for peace that's common among all the city-states involved in this conflict. Without the participation of Sparta, this sex strike will not achieve its ends. It can't be just one side doing it. It has to be both sides. As we mentioned, Synesius is Myrina's husband, and he's the target of her teasing in that famous seduction scene. He can barely contain the lust he has for his wife, and he's totally dependent on her sexual power. We also have two choruses in the play, and each chorus has like a spokesperson, and they highlight the gendered conflict at the heart of the play. So you have a chorus of old men who are initially opposed to the sex strike. They're very conservative. They're like ancient bros who see this as an offense to traditional gender roles where the men rule and the women obey, and on and on. And they try to seize control of the Acropolis, which the women have taken over, but they're thwarted by the women in a comic scene. Like they dump their like chamber pots on them. The chorus of old women support the women's strike, and they engage in a war of words and sometimes fisticuffs with the chorus of old men. And so they are matching the men toe for toe in their level of determination for their side of this conflict. There's also a magistrate, sometimes translated as the commissioner. He is the political authority in Athens who's trying to quell the women's rebellion. He's really portrayed as an ineffectual, pompous ass, which is quite common to political figures. And Aristophanes uses him to lampoon the men's inability to really understand women. There are also a Spartan herald and Spartan ambassadors who appear near the end of the play, and they too have been suffering from the sex strike, and they become willing to negotiate peace with Athens. So here's our plot points. The plot's relatively straightforward. First of all, Lysistrata, I'll leave a few things out, but this is kind of like the high-level view. First of all, Lysistrata convinces the women from Athens and Sparta to withhold sex from their husbands until the war ends. And she has a twofold strategy. First is the sex strike. Withhold sex until the men cave. And at one point in the play, she even says that the idea is brought up, well, what if the men force themselves upon us? And she says, well, you know, you do what you have to do, but you don't give them anything. You know, don't be unwilling and don't enjoy it, you know. And the men like will not enjoy the fact that you're not enjoying it. And that's basically the idea. But by and large, the idea is just to withhold sexual favors. But the other strategy is to seize the purse strings of the Athenian state. So the next plot point is the women seize the Acropolis where the Athenian treasury is held. And without those funds, the war cannot be financed. Now, once we have this premise established, the comedic action can unfold. The men, first of all, try to regain control of the Acropolis, but they're comically thwarted. The women dump these buckets of water and whatever like on them. And then we also see, especially in Act 2, where the men now have been like doing without sex for many days, and they are just, you know, in a frenzy, like they're just so exasperated and sexually frustrated that they they come very tumescent. They come on stage to plead for their sexual favors. And this is encapsulated in that famous seduction scene between Myrine and Synesias, her husband. That shows how desperately the men need the women. And then we have the chorus of old men and the chorus of old women who are engaging in these verbal and physical battles, and that is intensifying the gender conflict at the heart of the play. And then we move towards our conclusion where the Spartans and the Athenian officials finally agree to peace talks, and then our happy ending ensues. Peace is achieved, and we end with reconciliation and a celebration. Let me go into a few key passages here, and I'll just make some quick comments on them. So we start, I'm going to focus a lot on some of the Lysistrata speeches. So we have Lysistrata talking with the other women and pointing out, some of the frustrations the women are experiencing because the men are off at war all the time. And she says, "The fathers of your children, don't you miss them when they're away at the war? I know not one of you has a husband at home." And Kalanice says, "I know, my dear, my husband has been away for 5 months. 5 months, my dear, in Thrace, I think, keeping an eye on our general there." Myrina says, "And mine has been in Pylos for the last 7 months." And Lampedos says, "And as for my mom, if he ever turns up at home, it's only to put a new strap on his shield and fly off again." And Lysistrata says, "That's what it's like. There isn't anyone even to have an affair with, not a sausage." Talking of which, now the Milesians have rebelled. We can't even get our 6-inch ladies' comforters, which we used to keep as leather rations for when all else failed. Well then, if I found a way to do it, would you be prepared to join me with me in stopping the war? So this is an interesting point. The women are already doing without sex because the men are off, in far-flung city-states like having war. So they have to live without already. And now she wants to deny the men sex when they come back. And there's a lot of resistance early on in the play at this point. And she says, "Then I will tell you my plan. There's no need to keep it back, ladies. If we want to force our husbands to make peace, we must give up sex." Okay. Here's another passage where Lysistrata says, and this is really getting at the kind of the battle of the sexes here. So we have the magistrate who's engaged in dialogue with Lysistrata, and she says, "In the last war, we were too modest to object to anything you men did, and in any case, you wouldn't let us say a word. But don't think we approved. We knew everything that was going on. Many times we'd hear at home about some major blunder of yours, and then when you came home, we'd be burning inside. But we'd have to put on a smile and ask what it was you decided to inscribe on the pillar underneath the peace treaty. And what did my husband always say? 'Shut up and mind your own business.' And I did." Stratilis says, "I wouldn't have done." And the magistrate, who's ignoring her, talking to Lysistrata, says, "He'd have given you one if you hadn't." And Lysistrata says, "Exactly. So I kept quiet. But sure enough, next thing we knew, you'd take an even sillier decision. And if I so much as said, 'Darling, why are you carrying on with this silly policy?' he would glare at me and say, 'Back to your weaving, woman, or you'll have a headache for a month. Go and attend to your work. Let war be the care of the menfolk.'" Magistrate says, "Quite right, too, by Zeus." And Lysistrata says, "Right, that we should not be allowed to make the least little suggestion to you, no matter how much you mismanage the city's affairs. And now look, every time two people meet in the street, what do they say? 'Isn't there a man in the country?' And the answer comes, 'Not one.' That's why we women got together and decided we were going to save Greece. What was the point of waiting any longer, we asked ourselves. Well, now, we'll make a deal. You listen to us, and we'll talk sense, not like you used to. Listen to us and keep quiet, as we've had to do up to now, and we'll clear up the mess you've made. So the tables have really turned here. So you see this kind of like patriarchal, misogynist kind of atmosphere where the women have no power, no say in things. But now you can see Lysistrata is like very strongly saying, you guys have screwed up, and you keep screwing up. And you don't really have the right to say anything at this point. So we're going to take charge and fix things. And of course, the magistrate is, this boob who says, insufferable effrontery, I will not stand for it. She says, silence. And notice the stage direction magisterially. She's in charge here. All right. So like not lots of good kind of reversal of gender roles in this scene. Let's move on to another passage. And this is later on in this dialogue between the magistrate and Lysistrata. So the magistrate says, but the international situation at present is in a hopeless muddle. How do you propose to unravel it? She says, oh, it's dead easy. He says, would you explain? She says, well, take a tangled skein of wool, for example. We take it so, put it to the spindle, unwind it this way, now that way. She's miming with her fingers. That's how we'll unravel this war, if you'll let us. Send ambassadors first to Sparta, this way, then to Thebes, that way. And he says, are you such idiots as to think that you can solve serious problems with spindles and bits of wool? Notice, by the way, how Lysistrata has chosen for her metaphor something that women would be familiar with doing. This is just kind of like, they work with wool and they spin wool and so forth. And this is their area of expertise. And it's also, notice how the magistrate pays no respect to that. And she says, as a matter of fact, it might not be so idiotic as you think to run the whole city entirely on the model of the way we deal with wool. And then he says, how do you work that out? And she says, the first thing you do with wool is wash the grease out of it. You can do the same with the city. Then you stretch out the citizen body on a bench and pick out the burrs, that is, the parasites. After that, you prize apart the club members who form themselves into knots and clots to get into power. And when you've separated them, pick them out one by one. Then you're ready for the carting. They can all go into the basket of civic goodwill, including the resident aliens and any foreigners who are your friends. Yes, and even those who are in debt to the treasury. Not only that, Athens has many colonies. At the moment, these are lying around all over the place like stray bits and pieces of the fleece. You should pick them up and bring them here. Put them all together, and then out of all this, make an enormous great ball of wool, and from that, you can make the people a coat. He says, burrs, balls of wool, nonsense. What right have you to talk about these things? What have you done for the war effort? And she says, done, you puffed up old idiot. We've contributed to it twice over and more. For one thing, we've given you sons and then had to send them off to fight. He says, enough, don't let's rub the wound. She says, for another, we're in the prime of our lives. And how can we enjoy it? Even if we've got husbands, we're war widows just the same. And never mind us. Think of the unmarried ones, getting on in years and with never a hope. That's what really pains me. He says, but for heaven's sake, it's not only women that get older. She says, yes, I know, but it's not the same thing, is it? A man comes home, he may be old and gray, but he can get himself a young wife in no time. But a woman's not in bloom for long. And if she doesn't succeed quickly, there's no one will marry her. And before long, she's going around to the fortune tellers to ask them if she's any chance. So you see there, again, Lysistrata understand the women's point of view, and Aristophanes, who's writing this play, is sharing and privileging that point of view for the audience. Like, we are invited to see it from the woman's perspective. And she's the hero of the play. And the men are the butt of the joke, right? So we understand we're getting a lot more sensitivity to like what the women have been going through, and it's not an equal thing. Now, what happens when the strike is initiated? Everyone is sex starved, and it's not only the men but the women too, and they're starting to like get pretty itchy. And Lysistrata says, I just can't keep them to their vow of abstinence any longer. They're deserting. One I caught clearing out the stopped-up hole in the wall near Pan's grotto, another letting herself down by a rope, another leaving her post as sentry, and there was even one yesterday who was trying to fly down on Sparrowback, aiming straight for the nearest pimp shop. I was able to grab her by the hair and pull her back, and they invent every kind of excuse just to be allowed to go home. Here's one now. Hey, you, where do you think you're going? She says, I want to go home. I've got some fleeces there from Miletus, and the moths will be eating them up. No nonsense about moths. Go back inside. But I promise you, I swear, I'll come right back. I'll only spread it out on the bed. No, you won't. You're not going anywhere. Am I to leave my fleeces to be destroyed then? If necessary, yes. So you can see how she's having to like put out all these fires, like these women are trying to sneak off. So this is a very, as a collective action, you know, it's only going to hold for so long. Why? Because the power of love is that mighty. You know, that law of attraction is really strong. And these women have to hold out a little bit longer in order to achieve their aim. And then what happens now is a man approaches, and we have Lysistrata and several women around Lysistrata, and this includes Calenice and Myrrhine. And Calenice says, what is it, dear? What are you shouting for? Lysistrata says, a man. There's a man coming, and by the look of him, he's equipped for the mysteries of Aphrodite. Well, we know what that means. Aphrodite, lady of Cyprus, Paphos, and Cythera, as thou hast gone with us till now, so aid us still. Where is he, whoever he is? Lysistrata says, there, down by the shrine of Chloe. Calenice says, so he is, but who on earth is he? Lysistrata, have a look, all of you. Does anyone know him? Myrrhine says, yes, by Zeus, it's Synesias, my husband. And this is the setup for that famous scene. Well, dear, you know what you have to do. Keep him on toast. Tantalize him. Lead him on. Say no. Say yes. You can do anything except what you swore over the cup not to do. And Myrrhine says, don't worry. I'll do as you say. She says, Lysistrata, I'll stay here and start the process of toasting. Off you go. And this then initiates this nice long scene, which is really hilarious. I would love to see it staged, where she just teases the hell out of him. And, you know, it goes on and on for quite a while. Here's a little snippet of it, where this is a little far away into the scene where, you know, you're inching closer to like consummation, but she keeps kind of pulling back. Myrrhine, in a moment, love, I'll just pop in for the blanket. And Synesius says, these bedclothes will be the end of me. Myrrhine, who returns with a blanket and a box of ointment, says, lift yourself up. And Synesius, you can see very well I did that long ago. Listen, there's a lot of dick jokes in this play. You know, the phallus plays a prominent role, and you know, that's just one example of it. She says, do you want me to anoint you? Synesius says, no, damn it, I don't. Myrrhine says, too bad then, because I'm going to anyway. And Synesius says aside, Zeus, make her spill the stuff. Myrna says, hold out your hand and you can rub it on. And Synesius says, I don't care for it. I only like sexy ones. And besides, this positively reeks of prevarication. Myrna, pretending to sniff it in her turn, says, why, silly me, I brought the wrong one. Synesius says, well, never mind, darling, let it be. She says, don't talk such nonsense. She goes in with the box. Synesius says, curse whoever invented these ointments. Myrna says, returning with another unguent in a bottle, here you are, take this bottle. Synesius says, I've got one already and it's fit to burst. And, he's pointing, indicating what he's referring to. His bottle's full. Come here and lie down, damn you, and stop this stupid game. And she says, I will, I swear it by Artemis. I've got both my shoes off now. But, darling, don't forget about making peace. And on it goes. All right. So this is a wonderful scene because of what it does is it isolates to like just a couple, two people. And you're seeing how the sex strike kind of is manifested and, all the frustration that it's causing. Here's another scene, like later in the play, with Lysistrata talking about her womanhood. I am a woman, but I am not brainless. I have my share of native wit and more, both from my father and from other elders' instruction I've received. Now listen, both. Hard will my words be, but not undeserved. You worship the same gods at the same shrines, use the same lustral water, just as if you were a single family, which you are. Delphi, Olympia, Thermopylae. How many other Pan-Hellenic shrines could I make mention of if it were needed? And yet, although the mead is at our gates, you ruin Greece with mad intestine wars. This is my first reproach to both of you. And then she goes after the Spartans and the Athenians and reproaches them. Here she's basically closing the deal and trying to bring these parties together so that they can conclude the peace, which is what happens. All right, so that's some key passages. I hope you enjoyed those. It's a very lively translation. It's well done. And let me move on to discussion questions. And I'll just throw these out there, and if I have some comments, I'll give them. But this is just really just to open up a conversation for anyone who wants to reply. So, first question. Beyond ending the war, what are the women ultimately fighting for? What are their motivations? Is it simply peace or something more complex? So, yes, they want to conclude the peace. That's definitely aim number one. But I do believe that they want something more. I think they want respect. They want recognition. They would like to have more power in how this society's affairs are conducted. And they might want some kind of a shift in gender roles as well. Here's another question. The play relies heavily on the battle of the sexes, and this is the source for a lot of the comedy in the play. How are the men and women portrayed in the play? Are they fair or stereotypical? Well, I think when you are in a comic play, comedy tends to verge towards the stereotypical end of the spectrum because that's what gets you laughs, right? So you lampoon things, you exaggerate, you generalize, you overgeneralize, and so forth. So a lot of that's going on in the play. I think the women probably are portrayed a little bit more complex, with more complexity in this play than the men are. So the men seem to be a bit more stereotypical. The women, they are not just, women of virtue who like are heroic and everything. Like they have needs too. They have weaknesses. Like everybody, both genders have weaknesses in the play. But I think you're getting a more well-rounded picture of the women because the play really belongs to the women here. Like we're seeing it through their eyes. which leads us on to our next question. Is Lysistrata a feminist play? Do the women have agency? Does the play reinforce or subvert traditional gender roles and power structures? How is this not a feminist play, I would say? Like, I think it's absolutely a feminist play. And anyone, let's say you're a feminist, and if you think you can just throw away like 2,000 years of literature, literary history, because it was written by men, and say we don't have to treat that or anything like that, well, you are going to be missing out on some tremendous literature like Lysistrata, which was written by a man, but written from the women's point of view, written with a lot of sensitivity to what the women were going through. And I'm not saying feminists don't pay attention to Lysistrata. Of course they do, as they should, right? So yes, it's absolutely a feminist play, or it can be read from a feminist angle very productively. I do think the women have agency, but the women are also prisoners of their desires as well. The power of love is this instinct that makes us do things sometimes against our rational will. But the women do have agency, and Lysistrata is the real proponent of that, isn't she? I think the play is subverting these traditional gender roles, and some of the passages we looked at reflect that. Here's another question about kind of comic techniques. The play uses a lot of physical comedy and bawdy humor. I didn't touch on a lot of it, but it's all through the play. How does this contribute to the overall effect of the play? Is it simply for laughs, or does it serve a deeper purpose? Well, let's not forget, like, the point of drama is to entertain. The point of comedy is to make you laugh. And that's really a primary purpose. And the play is funny. And it would absolutely, I've never seen this on the stage myself, but I have no doubt it would be hilarious. And I think there's plenty of productions you can find on YouTube that you can try on for size and see how it plays. But yes, I think the physical comedy, the bawdy humor, the dick jokes and all, like that stuff it brings the humor down to earth. It makes it more accessible. It gets the belly laughs going. The sort of the shock of recognition. That is like certainly funny. That's the case. Does it serve a deeper purpose? I don't know. Is it just kind of like the play? I think the play is definitely doing more than just, it's not just a farce. It's not just like a sex comedy. Like there's like some really big themes here. But what's the relationship between the physical comedy and that? You can talk about it in the comments. There may be a connection. And let's get into some thematics here. Are the themes of war, gender inequality, sex and power, and collective action for the sake of peace still relevant today? Well, the question of relevancy. There's a reason why people still read this play and talk about it and write about it, because it is relevant. Gender inequality is still a thing. Is it exactly the same as it was in ancient Greece? Of course not. But that doesn't mean inequalities don't exist. They do. Sex and power dynamics, always a major theme in literature, always a major theme in society. So to the extent that this play talks about that, it's going to resonate. It's going to feel relevant. And I think one aspect of this play that maybe isn't talked about as much as it could be, I could be wrong about this. I haven't done a survey of the scholarly literature at all. But this idea of collective action is what jumped out at me. Like the fact that this plan only works if all the women go on the sex strike. It is a strike. It is, or like a strike, right? It's like a boycott. Like we're all of us aren't we're all in this together, and we're going to withhold sex from the men. And it shows you the power of collective action. Like when that happens, it only takes a few days to bring the men to heel. And there's a lesson that we can draw from that. When things in society are not going the way we want them to go, whoever you may be, whatever social class or gender or what have you, you always have the option of collective action. It's not easy to do, and the play is very revealing in how it shows the difficulty of bringing all that together. Like there is a lot of resistance to this collective action. It's hard to keep it together once the sex strike starts, and yet they soldier on through and they press through and they get the result that they want. So yeah, this is like, I find it like very relevant in that sense to show it, how it dramatizes the power of collective action. So let's draw some conclusions and talk a little bit more about some final thoughts on some of the big ideas or themes in the play. Lysistrata takes this highly implausible premise, that is, this would be hard to pull off in real life, wouldn't it? A sex strike. It takes this implausible premise to make a plausible point. And the plausible point is that the power of love, the instinct, the drive of love is superior to the power of war, because love wins in this story. And without love, life isn't worth living. So we see the impact that war has. It pulls apart the sexes. You know, they can't do what nature intended them to do. And life becomes miserable. It is not as worth living as it is when there's peace. Peace is more valuable than war. The play also highlights how when times are tough and the going is rough, if people join together and act collectively, they can affect positive change on society. And I think that's a pretty powerful message that's worth remembering in our own troubled times. So thanks for watching. I'm really curious to hear your responses to this play. I hope you've read it or reread it. Please do give it a read on your own in whatever translation you can find, and then respond in the comments, or if you have questions, you can do that. And if any of you want to make a response video, there's an open invitation to do that. Thanks everybody for watching. And next up on our Great Books Reading Plan Year 1, we're going to turn to the philosopher Plato and his book, The Republic. And we'll be reading books 1 and 2 in Plato's Republic. Thanks for watching.